We've been talking. I even started recording. That gummit. I thought
Oh,
I hit that thing. It don't matter. I thought I'd hit it when it first started. We missed out on a lot of good conversation, but that's all right. When I hit share screen, I thought it said that.
uh,
Yeah, but he I think he may be the first guy that beat Saban as far as his coaches go. I mean, because the
I
thing about Texas A&M, I've said this my whole life. They got everything going for them. A rabid fan base, TV market, uh, recruiting classes great every year, and nobody can ever win at that school.
well, they're the classic. They're just like I said about when we missed it because it wasn't recorded. But just like I was saying earlier about the about how Texas has a lot of good schools,
Yeah.
Texas A&M is the epitome of the good Texas school. They can get just enough talent to do just good enough, but they're never gonna. I don't think they're ever gonna be elite.
I don't either. I mean, they won a national championship, I think, in 1940 or something like that. And when Bryant was there, um, they won a couple conference championships. And I think that his last season there, they was 8-0 and ranked number 1. And Word League got he's going to Alabama, and they lost their last 2 games. But you think about the coaches that they've had there. I mean, it was actually really funny. I was in 81 or 82. Jackie Sherrill had signed a record contract there, and it was like 6 years for $2.1 million or something like that. And I mean, Sherrill left, and then they had R.C. Slocum was there for a while. What's the guy's name from Green Bay? Mike Martin
Sherman.
Yeah, at him they had Franchione. Then they had God, I can't think of his name now. I think he's at Arizona.
No, he just got fired from Arizona. Someone.
He got fired from there too, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you. Well, apparently he did like no recruiting at Arizona. Like Arizona State's about to get popped for recruiting excesses. Apparently, Arizona, while Sutherland was there, was doing no recruiting at all. They said that they have their stock is it was amazing because they said that their recruiting classes were like down at Kansas like levels.
Oh God, really?
Yeah.
And Sumlin, man, I remember he'd have 3 first round draft pick quarterbacks there at A&M sitting on the. I mean, Kyler Murray over there.
Kyler Murray, Johnny Manziel, and
what was that other? I mean, there's another kid out there too. I can't think of his name. Oh God. Anyway, and that team that Jimbo had last year. I mean, I think they didn't get hurt as bad with COVID, but
you know
was
what?
not.
I don't think the guy you're thinking of, I don't think he actually got drafted. He was a baseball. He was some baseball pitcher's son. I don't think he ended up getting drafted.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Because I want to say they had that big season opening win against South Carolina.
Yep.
When everybody thought South Carolina was supposed to be really good, and it ended up walking them into the rankings, and then South Carolina proved to be not that good, and it ended up screwing the whole season up for the rankings.
That was in 2014, I believe.
That sounds right.
Yeah, that was in 2014 because South Carolina had just come off those 3 straight 11-2 seasons, and
that was the year that Spurrier quit, didn't he?
No, he held on for one more year, and then he quit when they started off 1-4. And I thought he should have retired that year, but I don't really know why they was picked so high because he was out there talking one time. He said They had one player picked third team SEC on defense, and it was going to win the conference.
Mm-hmm.
And A&M just drilled them. He was in that press conference after the game, and he said, somebody, I've been reading telling the reporters, I've been reading about like y'all have about our new 3-4 defense. Anybody like that 3-4 defense? I missed some of the stuff. Oh God, I think it was 2013. It was 2000. That might have been 2014, right before that, or 13 anyway. But he made the statement before media days that Saban had underachieved. It had 5 straight number 1 recruiting classes, so he should have 5 national championships. So I kept waiting for they had that 900-pound gorilla in the room. And I can't wait for them to ask Spurrier and man, he was great. Because man, I don't know how they do it. They just reload every year. And I was at Florida, and we had one number 1 recruiting class, but he just does a tremendous job, and goes on and on praising him. And I think that was the same year too. Some reporter asked him. They said about him making out the schedule, and
Mm-hmm.
he said, "You think I make out the schedule?" He said, "I don't make out the schedule." He said, "If I made out the schedule," he said, "Georgia would be playing Alabama, and I'd be playing Ole Miss."
And I remember he said something along the lines of if he could make out his perfect schedule, he'd schedule Georgia that first game, because I think they always played the second game of the season.
Yeah.
And he something along the lines of I scheduled Georgia to be the first game of the season so I could take advantage of all those suspensions that they were always going to
have. Oh God, I love. There was one year. I think Alabama lost to Clemson in the national championship game, and Spurrier said Saban got the Coach of the Year award, and Spurrier said, "Well, I guess they gave it out for the national championship."
That's classic. That Spurrier made things fun, and when they everybody's talking about when Lee Corso retires from game day, that's the perfect. He would be the perfect fit to go over to game day.
Oh man, I can only imagine him up there with his. Oh man, he would be. I mean, yeah.
At saying that, if he did get the job, everybody's anticipating it being so exciting and so fun. He'd probably just be a dead fish on TV.
He probably would, because that's a good point. I mean, I don't know how he would how he'd handle that. He might be a dead fish in that situation. I mean, I don't know. That'd be something else. One thing you got, he's getting up there in age. He's probably 75 now, 74, 75.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, I mean, because he's not, young anymore.
It wouldn't be matter of fact, he's probably about the same age. He's probably just a couple of years younger than Corso himself.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably not that much of a difference. I heard Corso was coaching at Indiana, and they took the opening kickoff and went down the field and scored a touchdown. He called a timeout, ran his team out there on the field, took a picture of them up on the scoreboard, leading Notre Dame 6. Back.
You got to take advantage of those moments when they come. When else are you going to be coaching a team that's going to be leading 60s, 70s era Notre Dame at any point in the game?
Yeah, not many, especially in Indiana. He when Alabama in '91, Alabama won 11-1 that year, and they had all the games like Alabama did back then. 17-6, 14-9, stuff like that. And of course, kept saying that's the worst 6-1 team in America, worst 7-1 team, worst 8-1. Gene Stallings said Lee Corso wouldn't know a good team because he never coached one. And that was the team they lost to that year was and lost to Florida. And Spurrier said earlier in the week he would beat Alabama by 30 points.
He put a 30. He put in a. I thought Georgia was the only team that he ever said he was going to beat. He was going to beat by a certain number of points.
He did that in Alabama too. And I mean, that Alabama fans were just irate. Alabama players were mad. I mean, they fired up. Halftime, Florida led 6-0. It ended 35-0. So he backed it up.
Yeah, like I said, I used to always love it. He would say, well, "We're going to put a 50 on somebody."
And yeah, I remember when Barry Switzer used to say that. I used to love it when Switzer said that. Spurrier, I don't know if you know this or not, but remember those some of those games against Kentucky when they beat like Kentucky like 77-7, and I mean just drilling them.
Mm-hmm.
He was the quarterbacks coach, or I think he's quarterbacks coach for offense, maybe an offense coordinator too, at Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
And Curry fired him. And Spurrier said that if he ever faced him again, he'd make sure he knew what kind of offensive coordinator he was.
Well, yeah, because he was the quarterbacks coach under the previous Pepper Rogers, and then Pepper Rogers got fired. They brought in Curry. Curry had the opportunity to hire Spurrier to stay on the staff, but he said no, and yeah, that started that little mess.
How did I'm just curious, how did Georgia Tech fans take that when Curry left? Were they mad?
I don't know that they were so much as mad as they were. You have to realize at the time when, I mean, really, and really, you could make the argument that to this day we're still not to that level, but at especially at that time in the mid '80s, Georgia Tech was down.
Right.
And I think it was understood that if you have a chance to get a job at a school like Alabama, even if you are a diehard Georgia Tech alum, you have to take that job. So I don't think it's so much that they were up. I don't think they were upset with him so much as they were just disappointed in why did you have to come and get our guy? Out of all, it's not so much being upset with Curry, it's more being upset with Alabama, and of course, obviously seeing that Alabama never really took to him.
Well, I don't know if you know the story of what happened in Alabama, but Governor Guy Hunt had promised this coach that he had the Alabama job.
You told me about that Bobby Bowden.
Yeah, he went over there at Legion Field and got through playing, and thought he was walking in to sign a contract, and walked into, and there was a 12-person interview. He turned right around and walked out. And I thought, man, what? I mean, talk about a perfect fit. And that was right before Florida State had really started, made that run that he had. I mean, he was 57 years old. He was in his prime then, man.
Yeah.
I mean, and oh God, I mean, I don't know how that happened. I don't know if it was the Stallings. Stallings was a good hire. Alabama fans like Stallings, but the I don't know if they just didn't want to give back control. They finally gave it to Saban. So and then we had the Bows, and then they had Fran.
The fact that I think we touched on this the last time, but it's the fact that Saban is not. It's not so much that you didn't want to give Saban, because really, when you think about it, what is Saban really? I mean, yes, what does Saban really have that other coaches couldn't have had, that Saban himself hasn't created? I guess is a good way to put it. But like I said, you know, he's got all the analysts, and that's a totally Saban thing. You know, nobody else was doing that before him. So
Right.
can you really say that no other coach would have gotten that if they had asked for it? And you know, the whole I told the story about the restaurant thing, about the restaurant deal, about how the players were coming late to practice, and they said
Yeah.
we it's because of that. I mean, would that be, you know, I think that if any coach had come to them and said, "Hey, this is the deal. Can we do something about this?" Something would it have been to the degree that Saban got? Maybe not, because Saban, the way that I imagine his mind working is that he worked it out to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. If some other football coach probably would have said, hey, either get a food truck here or, you know, he would have left it in their hands, but he would have just asked for something, but he would have left it in somebody else's hands to actually put together. Whereas Saban would actually nail down all the specifics about it. Like I said, I'm not sure that. I guess I'm just not sure that Saban is really doing anything that anybody else couldn't do. They're just not smart enough to think about doing it.
Well, I listened to Kiffin talk about it, and he was on an interview, and I can't remember this guy's name. And he's like, the way Saban is, he holds up a trophy. Oh yeah, this is so much fun. Pass it off to the next guy. He goes, waits the next year, and they said, well, what about him going to Applebee's? He goes, he's not going to Applebee's. And he said, well, what's that? You know, have a beer. He goes, well, first of all, he doesn't even drink. He said, he's not going to Applebee's. He said, and you're not going to have a conversation with him unless he gives you an itinerary 2 days later about what they're going to talk about. And he said, and on his way driving in, he calls everybody, and he says he doesn't waste any second of any day. So that's why he's so good.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, one thing about him too is that I've seen with coaches is he has the ability to change. You know, so those coaches, they stay with it, they stay with it, they stay with it. I mean, when he's in that run, you know, RPO was the thing to go. He went out and changed. I mean, you know.
Saban understands that he understands that his role is to be the manager.
Mm-hmm.
He's the guy who stirs the ship. The direction that he stirs the ship has to be in the direction that the ship isn't going to be left behind. That's all he has to worry about. As far as winning the race goes, you know, if it's like a yacht race or whatever, he's going to hire the best helmsman, and he's going to say, okay, well, you know the ins and outs about how to best to steer this boat, so I'm going to let you stir the boat. Don't get us be left behind. And
Yeah.
that, because it's like you said, I mean, he'd be happy to be winning games 17 to 10, but he knows that's not the game. Now, yeah, you might be able to do that against, you know, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, South Carolina, but he's not worried about Vanderbilt, South Carolina, or Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
He's not even worried about Auburn or LSU. He's worried about Oklahoma. He's worried about Ohio State. And he's worried about having to keep up with them.
You're exactly right. I mean, I've seen some coaches hang on to it, but I mean, yeah, I mean, he's seen it. He said, all right, we're changing, going to that. I mean, like, you know, Miles at LSU, you know, he held on to that same I formation and, you know, ended up getting him fired. And,
He did.
yeah, I did.
Because even when he said he was going to go to Kansas and do things differently, he was still doing the same stuff at Kansas.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, starting to get the coaches on the hot seat, you know, Kirby is still doing the same football that they did at Alabama. I mean, I still think that can work if you mix some plays in, because the Alabama Georgia game last year, at halftime it was 24-20, and Georgia was running the ball. And I remember about halfway through the third quarter, they showed the clock up there, and Georgia had the ball. Georgia had the ball like 26 minutes to Alabama's 9. Alabama's 10. Georgia had like 150 yards rushing. Alabama's 55. And I was like, man, this is beginning to play right in Georgia's hands.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, he tries to start getting in a shootout with Alabama and throwing the ball 3 downs out of 4. And I was like, I don't know what he does, but every time something's working against Alabama, Kirby changes it. And I think that seat's getting warm for him.
I'm not sure if Kirby will ever be on a true hot seat, as in when you say hot seat, I always imagine it is, oh well, if something goes wrong, this coach could get. I don't think Smart will ever be at that level, but he is at that level to where if he doesn't win it all this year, they you 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 do start to wonder, will you ever win it?
Well, and you think about it, that after that first year when they went 8-5, he had that recruiting class that was supposed to be the greatest recruiting class in history.
And who's left?
Huh?
And who's left from it?
I don't know if they may have a couple players left from it.
Well, that's exactly my point. But it didn't actually out that much.
Yeah, and what did they actually do? I mean, they won one SEC, and they lost to
class. That recruiting, you remember the SEC, well, the lion's share of that one SEC championship team was still Michelle and Chubb.
Yeah,
like
sure was.
The recruiting class that out of Kirby Smart's actual recruiting classes, since they've become top, since they've actually taken over the team, what have they actually? I mean, really, when you think about it, it's diminishing returns because they had, like I said, Michelle and Chubb were the main guns on that one team that won the SEC. But then the next year, I think was that the year where
Bama came back and beat them. In the they was up 28-14, and Bama came back and beat them. Then the next year, LSU blew them out, and then last year they didn't even make it.
So that's exactly what I was trying to get I didn't know if I wasn't sure about the time frame about between the time Alabama beat them and when LSU beat them. But yeah, it's diminishing returns then because you had a close SEC championship loss, you had a blowout SEC championship loss, and then you had no SEC championship loss.
You think about the Alabama games, he's led, let's see, 119 tied or led 119 out of 120 minutes in the first two, and then led 38 minutes in the next one. I mean, he's 0-3 against Alabama. I mean, I think they're getting restless over there. When I looked up at his record first 6 years and Rick's, I mean, Rick does have 2 SEC titles.
I made that argument with people, and people used to say, no, it's a totally different thing. It's a totally different deal. I made if Mark Richt existed if the same environment that exists today existed when Mark Richt was the coach when he started off as the coach at Georgia, he would have the exact same. He would have a better. You got to think his second year, they were number 3.
Yeah.
So playoff. If there was a 14 playoff back then, that's a playoff team, and it's very likely that's a winning playoff because they would have had to have beaten Ohio State, and then they probably give Miami a good run in the Orange Bowl.
If you remember back in 2006 or 2007 or 2006, somewhere there.
That's the year the LSU won the title with 2 losses.
Yeah, that's your Georgia should have got in, right?
Yes, that was Georgia. That again, if you have a 14 play, really they should have. Well, no, because they couldn't. They didn't play in the SEC title game because they lost. They lost a tiebreaker with Tennessee.
Yeah.
But if you had had a 14 playoff, because I want to say they finished number 3 that year too.
Yeah, because I was like, man, because a bunch of teams lost in front of them, and that's how LSU got back in it. Because I was like, man, Georgia needs to be the team that's in this thing.
Because if I'm not mistaken, LSU was ranked behind Georgia before the SEC title game.
Yeah, they were
Taken.
But
yeah,
who lost?
They jumped over them because that was the I wanted was Matt Stafford on that. Matt Stafford was still there,
Stafford.
And that was the that running back No Sean Marino.
Oh God, I forgot all about that name.
Yeah.
I mean, these playoff things. I was watching when I forgot how they all been matched up now, but I was talking about that 2008 when Alabama lost that SEC championship game to Florida, and they said had the playoffs been in then the first round would have been number 1 Florida versus number 4 Alabama.
Well, that's yeah, but that's the problem with because 9 times out of 10 Alabama only fell to number 4 because they had to. First of all, you had to they until 2011 they did everything to avoid a rematch. So they had to bump Alabama far enough down so that they could bump other teams up.
If you remember that, I think it was 2000. It was 2011 or 2012. It was one of the years that Alabama got in. And I think
11. That was the rematch with LSU.
Yeah, but I'm thinking that I can't remember who they beat, but I think it was Iowa State beat Oklahoma, or Iowa State beat Oklahoma State.
State, Oklahoma on the night that Oklahoma State, because this is what really ticked people off that year, is that Oklahoma State was, I can't remember. I think the basketball team had had a crash, and so they were a lot of the football players knew a lot of the basketball players, so they were shook it up about it, and they had to play on a Friday. It was a Friday night game.
But that field goal was good. They called it wide left.
Yes, there was
because when he hit it, I was like, damn. And I said him call it no good. I was like, man, that field goal was good. And they kept showing it over and over. I was like, man, that's good. And I was like, oh God.
I had totally forgotten about that field goal, but yeah, there was so much to that game because and that's why we have a 14 playoff right now. We're gonna have a 16-team playoff in a couple of years, or 12 playoff.
Yeah, let's start on that. Yeah, we'll start on that. We'll do coaches on the hot seat next time. Let's go to the playoffs now. So do you think it's going to go to a 16 playoff first or an 18 playoff?
Well, I wonder if all of this Texas Oklahoma news and I wonder if that won't put this on the back burner for everybody to see how it shakes out, because the 12-team proposal that's been put on that everybody has been agreeing about is the idea of you having 5 or 6 strong conferences. But now you think about it, if the Big 12 goes away, or if the Big 12 is not the Texas Oklahoma Big 12, do you really want them to have a?
No, I mean, who are you going to go get? To come back? Yeah, I mean, you don't have Texas and Oklahoma. I mean, what?
That's the main reason why that provision is in place, is to ensure that a Texas or Oklahoma, all you got to do is win the Big 12, you get into the playoff.
Yeah.
Ohio State, win the Big 10, you get into the playoff. Alabama, win the SEC, you get into the playoff. That's the way to ensure that all of your big brands get into the playoffs. But now, if you have a situation where now you got Oklahoma and Texas competing with Alabama for one of those playoff spots, do we even have conference guarantees for the playoffs?
Think about it. Alabama got in the playoffs and didn't even win it that year. Georgia won it because Auburn and Georgia played in the SEC championship that year, and Alabama was the 4th team in. Because if my friend was talking, because I know they would have jumped Georgia. He said if Auburn would have beat Georgia in the SEC championship game, Auburn's last 4 games would have been Georgia, Alabama, Georgia, Alabama.
Well, year they said the safest team going into the SEC, the team that was I forget the team that felt most secure about being in the playoff going into that SEC championship game was the team that didn't even play yet. It was Alabama, because they knew they were gonna be in it no matter what, because they were 11-1 or 12
And
or
yeah, they were. And it's almost if they come to this super conference like this right here, it's almost better not to play a conference championship game if you're going to get in there, because you got a week to rest and a week to work on the team instead of getting beat up against the Georgia or something like that. I mean, that plays more in your favor.
That's why I say this whole and it's funny that this whole thing, because apparently Texas and Oklahoma and the SEC have been talking about this for months, and it's interesting that this all I this playoff thing would have been in the works while they would have been talking about this. But like I said, I don't see any way that the playoff expansion goes forward with Texas and Oklahoma in the SEC, unless it's kind of like what you said about the four teams. Unless that's the end result, the ultimate end result is the four-team super conference, the 16-team super conferences, and then that way you say, okay, every conference champion gets a spot, and then maybe you say every conference gets 2 spots guaranteed, and then you divvy it out somewhere else like that.
Yeah, I mean, because you would have to have, 8 at-large teams. So I mean, if you had, and that gives you also too, because it doesn't happen as often as used to, but I can remember a 7-5 team slipping up and beating 10-1 Tennessee. I remember when LSU did it.
Yeah.
So I mean, that gives some, if you go in there and you know that you're 7-5, and we win this game, we're in the playoffs. They might get drilled.
I'm a Georgia Tech fan. 2000, I want to say 2013. We played Florida State. We were 6-6. Matter of fact,
That's right. I remember that game. Yeah, I remember that game.
It was 2012, I believe, because it was the year before Miss Winston came.
Yeah, 2013, Florida State played Duke.
We were 6-6. We got into the ACC championship game because Miami and North Carolina, who we tied with them, but we lost the tiebreakers. But because they were on probation, they couldn't play in it. So we snuck into the ACC title game, and we had the ball with like less than a minute to go, and we were driving down the field through an interception in the end zone to end the game. If we get a touchdown right there, we're a 7-6 team going to the Orange Bowl. So you just imagine if you had a playoff berth attached to that, that's a 7-6 playoff team.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it puts a lot more interest in it right there. If you got a team that must be 7-6 and slip in the playoff.
Yeah. Which is one why they'll never, and just as I was talking about the four super conferences, it wouldn't surprise me now that I think about it if that isn't a way for them to say, you know what, we don't need this 12-team expansion, this 12-team playoff deal, because you got to think, if you have 4 super conferences, there goes your 4 playoff teams right there, right around.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, now, you do that. I mean, we know that's coming to an end anyway, but the bowls will never. I mean, they'll be gone for good then.
You got to look at it. Now, ESPN owns most of the non. When you because they're talking about taking the current New Year's Six bowls,
right?
The bowls, Sugar, Fiesta, all of those bowls, the big bowls. They're talking about putting those into the expanded playoff as semifinal and quarterfinal games. So now, you take those bowl games out of the equation. Then you have the Sun Bowl, which is on CBS. And then you have a couple other bowl games that are independently owned. But once you get past that, all the rest of the bowl games are really just uh, ESPN properties.
I,
ESPN, they
I
don't have
know
it
that.
show during the holiday season, except for holiday basketball tournaments. Why
Yeah,
would they just say, you know what? Yeah, we'll still let Toledo and Minnesota play in the Detroit Bowl. Because what? We don't have anything else to show. That's why most of these bowl games exist in the first place.
yeah. I remember when there used to be like 30 something bowls. Now you got what 50 or 60 something of them.
Well, it's I want to say it's around 42 or 43.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking when it was. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, I don't know where I got that number at.
Because
But you're talking about 86 teams.
I was just about to say it's an 86 team that requires 80 if you're going to have to, because remember if you want to have winning teams in bowl games or non-losing teams in bowl games, you have to have 86 out of 100 and I think it's 135 teams that play FBS college football right now.
Mm-hmm.
uh, More than half of the teams playing college football have to end up with winning records.
Yeah, and I don't see how that's mathematically possible.
It is because of the FCS games.
Right. I remember back in the 94, 95, 6, something like that. Mississippi State went 7-4 and didn't get a bowl game. And I'm sitting there thinking about an SEC team now going 7-4, not going to a bowl.
A SEC team that goes 7-4, you're going to remember when the Gator Bowl used to be a big deal?
I remember the Gator Bowl was a big deal. Yeah.
You go 7-4 in the SEC now, you're going to the Gator Bowl.
Yeah, I remember that. I mean,
You're not only
I remember
going
the
to
Liberty Bowl was big.
Your Liberty, but I was just about to say 7-4 SEC team. You're going
Liberty
to
Bowl.
at the bare minimum, you're going to a Liberty Bowl, a Gator Bowl, a
Yeah.
Music City. You're going to
Music Bowl.
a good bowl game.
Yeah, I mean the Gator Bowl. Yeah, it was big, and and I don't know, just some of the luster's taken off of it. There's a YouTube video that I watched of Brian. He was about, I don't know if it was an 80 or 81, but they was asking him about playoffs, and it was so pathetic. He was saying, you know, with the TV and money involved now, this is when ESPN just started. This, I don't, he's seeing, 20 years ahead. He's talking about the money and TV involved. He said it was going to come to a playoff. He said, but he'd hope they keep the bowls involved in it. But he said he's happy how's going. But he's seen it back then what was fixing to happen. And I mean, and I think ESPN started what 79, and
I want to.
yeah,
I think it was a little bit earlier. I think it might have been 76 or 77.
okay, all right. Well,
But it's in that. I give her. You're sometime within 5 years of 80-81.
okay. Because when I was a kid, I can remember listening to Alabama and Ole Miss on the radio. I listened to Alabama, Tennessee on the radio. I mean, now I'm watching, Alabama and Akron or whoever they're playing, every week out there on all these channels. I mean, it's just totally taking it over.
It's and I don't. I would be interested to talk to. I know there's probably some histories of how ESPN, because I know there was a famous court case. I forget the name of it, because I want to say it was the University of Georgia and University of Oklahoma were the plaintiffs, and they were suing. I want to say the NCAA or college football in general, because back then the schools and conferences couldn't work out their own deals. The TV,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
and
Yeah. Notre Dame was the first team to do it, I believe.
Huh?
What, Notre Dame the first team to do it? To work out a deal?
Notre Dame was the first team to have it to work out. Well, they're the only team to work out its own deal with a conference. Yeah, with a net. Yeah.
Network.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's right around, and I would be interested to know how far, because once you get to the Supreme Court, those court cases have been going on for years and years and years.
Yeah.
So how far along that court case had been going. I would be interested to see how that tied into the creation of ESPN. The timetable of, did when the people that created ESPN, were they looking at this little case that was going through the system and saying, you know what, college football is going to be a big ticket going forward, because that's basically that's the only reason why we have an ESPN2 nowadays. That's the only reason why we have ACC network, SEC network, Big Ten network, is for those football games.
And you got ESPNU, you got College Sports South, Fox Sports. I mean, you got. I mean, somebody was right enough to see, what was fixing to happen with college football.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
because you've got the most between college football and college basketball. That is, I would dare say, that is 90% of your big time. I would say that's 90% of your of the inventory, the live sports inventory that gets shown on ESPN and all the networks over a year's time. Is college football, college basketball.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. I mean, yeah. And they run, into each other like that. I mean, because every game's on TV. I mean, you start on
TV from every. You got to think. You only got 30 You only got 30-something baseball teams. You only have 30-something teams of every major sport. So, and they're all playing at the same time except for the NFL. So you can't show. You can maybe show 2 baseball games a night. You can, and that's going to get you how far? But during basketball season or football season, you got 4 games on ESPN during Saturday, 4 games on ESPN2, 2 or 3 games on ABC, Fox.
Oh yeah,
Fox has got double headers and triple headers on the network, and then you go to FS1, you got triple headers, and you got 4 or 5 games on there. It's content overload.
And even on CBS, sometimes they'll have 2 SEC games back to back.
2 SEC games, and then if you might catch an Army or a Navy game.
Yeah.
And they have their own, they have their own cable network where they show AAC games on the sports network.
It starts, sometimes 10 in the morning with some of these teams, and then those West Coast games kicking off, 10 at night.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting there till 2 o'clock in the morning.
I don't know if you're a basketball fan, but for a couple of years, ESPN used to do a big marathon at the beginning of basketball season, where they would start. They would start somewhere like Hawaii, and they would have like a game going on in Hawaii at like 12 o'clock at night. They would have like a West Coast game that was started at like 12 o'clock, which would be like 8 o'clock Eastern time.
Yeah,
and they would go to a Hawaii game. That would be like from 2 to 4, 2 to 5 or whatever in the morning. And then they would break it down, and they would do like a 24-hour block of just basketball games to start their season. And it was a couple of years ago, Boston College, Georgia Tech played Boston College over in Ireland. And I, of course, being a Georgia Tech fan, I was up to watch that game at about 7 o'clock. To myself, what? Because this is when ESPN was doing that deal, and I was like, this could work for football,
Yeah. Oh, but yeah.
You start off with a pack, like a West Coast game on Friday night at like 2, like 11 o'clock, let's say. That's 7 o'clock Eastern time, right?
Yeah.
So, and the football games last 4 hours, so that gives you a bigger window of time. So you have your Hawaii game that starts off at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. That gets you to about 7. That gets you to about 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. Have yourself.
And when I was a kid, though, and they could even do this right here. I don't know if you remember, but on ESPN, they used to show those Ivy League games. I used to watch them at 7 and 8 o'clock in the morning.
No, I didn't see. No, I never.
Yeah.
Live.
Yeah. They used to have, like, used to watch Harvard and Yale. They had to start at 7 o'clock in the morning. They'd have them on ESPN.
do that. 'Cause like I said, I mean,
Yeah,
it would be something that would be like a every, really, you're not going to do it every week, but just
right.
like special thing, like, because matter of fact, people would probably get, people would, matter of fact, it was one year at Thanksgiving, I was watching, it was UConn and Rutgers. They were playing at like 10 o'clock in the morning.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I've watched those four. Yeah.
So, like
I
I said,
mean,
it's something that could be done. I would love to see it because, like I said, you're talking about 24 hours straight of football.
oh God, man, I never go to bed. I'd be taking little naps.
Uh,
Well, if that got me thinking, if we go to this super conference, but you're gonna have 64 teams there. Are you going to force Notre Dame to finally join? I mean, I know they're already locked with, almost in the ACC.
I,
Are they going to be forced to
I,
go ahead and join?
I am 99.9% sure that Notre Dame would be the 15th. Notre Dame, if that comes to, because if they do this, it's going to definitely affect the playoff. And I really do think that it's going to say these four conferences are the only are the only, whatever we do with the playoff, these four conferences are going to be guaranteed to be in the playoff every year. Notre Dame joins the ACC at that point.
And Notre Dame I know they just seem like such a better fit for the Big Ten. I mean, with
People talk about that, and and geography geography wise, it's correct. But let me ask you this: do you ever really think about Notre Dame as being an Indiana school? Like when
no, I never think about.
I mean, yeah, when you look at a map, yes, Notre Dame
Yeah,
is right there in the middle of Indiana.
I never
But
think about that.
really, they come across as what, more of an East Coast school, right?
Yeah,
East Coast,
yeah.
northeastern part of the country. So, like I said, that part, that doesn't really, because basically, while the ACC got started off as what people have to think about is that while the ACC got started off as a Southern Conference,
Mm-hmm.
obviously it was part of the Southern Conference
Right.
originally.
Yeah, way back in the day.
In the modern world of college sports, it's the East Coast version of the Pac-10.
Yeah,
It's
because
it's the
once the
league
Big
that's
East went
fresh,
out,
huh?
once the Big East went, they got those other teams. Yeah, also all up and down the seaboard.
It's the East Coast version of the Pac-10, Pac-12. It's the entire Atlantic seaboard.
You know, you've been talking the other day. What is it that somebody told me that when Holtz was there, they lowered the academic standard or something. I don't know, but I can't figure out how Notre Dame, I mean, was the sacred cow of college football, and they just can't get it back. I mean,
Because Notre Dame was what we were just talking about the rise of television. You got to think
yeah,
back when you were talking about you having to you were having to watch that listen to that Alabama Ole Miss game on the radio.
mm-hmm.
You're probably sitting there in Alabama having to do that. Guess what? You could probably turn on CBS or ABC or NBC, and guess who you see that Saturday?
Yep,
Notre Dame. But
yep,
once you start putting the SEC on CBS, you start putting ACC games, Big East games on CBS or ESPN. ABC starts showing Big 12 and all these other games. Guess who? Guess the Notre Dame is the main school that lost out when they started letting other people on TV.
now, that is a good point. I never really thought about that, because that's right. Because those kids could go up there and be on TV every single week
Hmm.
and get a better chance to get to the NFL to go to Notre Dame. And now that everybody's on TV, they've lost that. Man, I never really thought about that. That is a good point.
Hmm. Because you got to
I
think,
mean,
even with Southern Cal and Stanford being big time schools on the West Coast, they were their biggest game every year was being able to go to being able to play Notre Dame.
yeah. Well, I did not didn't think about that. I mean, and I mean, last year, I mean, they're getting better. I mean, that year when Alabama beat them in the playoffs, I mean, championship game, God, that was the worst undefeated team I've ever seen. But, last year, I think it was 31-14 or something, but they were, that team was only a skill player away. I mean, they had those big old white tight ends. And yeah, I mean, they were catching the ball. If they'd had one skill player, one speedster,
A game
that
breaker.
would
It's
be
like
something.
they have talent. They've had talent at receiver because one of the brothers that have the weird names, Aquimius Brown, and one of them went to USC, and I think the other one went to Notre Dame because he's in the NFL right now.
Yeah.
Well, both of them are in the NFL right now, but yeah, they've had talent, and the guy who was with the Texans, and I think he went to the Dolphins. Fuller,
Yeah.
they've had talent but it's like you said, they haven't had that elite game breaker who can
Yeah.
just
I mean, because
uncoverable.
I mean, their defense, I mean, hold Alabama 31 points last year. Their defense played well enough to keep them in the game. And if you had just that one, like that one elite player, like that could break away, I mean, that team could have been dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we probably talked on this last time too. I still believe one day, I tell my friend this the other day, he's like, no, that's not going to happen. But I still believe one day you're going to find the right coach that goes out there and can find those. I was telling him, I said, look, man, you got 6 big offensive linemen and a glorified guard and 2 great. You only got to have 4 good athletes, a quarterback who can throw, and somebody's going to run the triple option, and they're going to win a championship with that because most teams ain't seen it.
I like you said, we talked about it. I don't disagree.
I mean,
it's just going to take. It's going to take a. Paul Johnson knew the triple option like nobody.
Man, it was beautiful.
Like nobody's business, but Paul Johnson also, and I'm a Georgia Tech fan who loves Paul Johnson. Don't get me wrong. Paul Johnson has the personality of a piece of cardboard. he because they always like to say that you can't recruit running the triple option. I don't think it's the fact that you can't recruit running the triple option. I think it's just the fact that the one example that you've had of a coach at a major school running a triple option was a guy who's not a very good recruiter. I'm not going to say he's not a because he did a good job of recruiting out athletes for his offense, but he's not a good salesman. As in, he's not a guy who can just go to this. He couldn't go into Percy Harvin's. Just to give an example of the type of player that I'm talking about, that would work. That would really set that type of offense apart. He couldn't go into Percy Harvin. A Percy Harvin makes any offense work. So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
He couldn't go into a Percy Harvin's living room and say, "Hey, you come to my school, and you're going to be on every highlight reel." He didn't have that kind of personality. He had the kind of personality to say, "Hey, I'm going to go into this 5'9" kid who can run real fast, but he's not really strong. I'm going to go into his living room and tell him, hey, you want to go to Western Kentucky, or do you want to come to Georgia Tech?" He was that kind of a recruiter, and he did good recruiting that way. But like I said, he's not going to get, he was not going to get the elite type of athlete because he's not that kind of guy.
And I believe that, like I said, the right kind of guy, he can get, you only got to have 3 or 4 of them. I mean, 2 running backs, a quarterback that can throw, and I mean, 1 receiver he only catch 4 passes a game, but 3 of them's going to be for 70-yard strikes. When the safety start walking up the line.
And like I said, I don't know if you follow Georgia Tech, but the coach that followed Paul Johnson, Jeff Collins, he's a master recruiter. But he's married to doing things a modern way, because that's why he was hired, was to go away from the triple option and to go away from all of that. I truly do think that if you put his recruiting together with Paul Johnson's ability to run the triple option offense, that would be the team that you're talking about. Because
I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
Collins could go into a kid's if that's what he had to work with, he could go into a kid's living room and say, "Hey, do you want to catch 10 passes a game and maybe one of them gets you on Sports Center every night, or do you want to catch 4 passes a game and 3 out of the 4 at least get you on Sports Center every night? Because you're gonna catch some 70-yard bombs."
I used to say it all the time, man. I mean, them safeties are creeping up the line. They fake, and I mean, just wide open. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen that.
I saw it for 10 years, 10 plus years.
I mean, I'm going back even when those yeah, I remember what George said. Those Nebraska teams, when that always, have a 60, 70-yard strike down there. I mean, it was just a thing of beauty. It's still one of my favorite offenses now. When that thing's ran right. I mean, when I played Georgia Southern that year, they won the national championship. They had 340 yards rushing on Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And Saban got off on some kind of rant, and he said, I think we was only giving up 50 yards of offense or 50 yards rushing a game, and I think we had 8 players go to the NFL, and I think that team won a national championship because they ran through us like shit through a tin horn, man, and we could not stop them.
They could, and I want to say that was it the next year or was it that year? Was it that year that they beat Florida? They actually beat Florida.
It may have been the same year they beat Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Because they had because that was did Muschamp get fired that year, or was it the next year that he got fired?
I want to say it was that year because I want to say that loss to Georgia Southern was the straw that broke his back.
I mean, and you're probably right on that because I was never. I don't know why they gave him that job at South Carolina. I was never a Muschamp fan. I knew a guy who went to some of the
that job at North Carolina.
Yeah,
because because they didn't get they weren't expecting Georgia. They weren't expecting Georgia to call Bart Richt into the office at the end of that Georgia Tech game to have that meeting that they had with him.
Okay.
If you remember, the scuttlebutt was that because Kirby Smart was getting tired of waiting, South Carolina fired. Well, not fired. They didn't fire, but they worked it out to where Spurrier would leave early so that they would be out in front to be able to get Kirby. And then and I want to say that there were rumors that he was all set to take that job until Mark Richt left.
And then his dream job came open. You know who the job he wanted, and it just shows that Dye's power he didn't influence, but he was interviewed at Auburn, and he wanted the job when Malzahn got it, and
Kirby?
They told it was Kirby, Malzahn, and was it that guy from Buffalo? There was 3 people they interviewed, and it was on the
Turner Gill.
Yeah, Turner Gill. In the search committee, which they already had their mind made up, it was Pat Sullivan, Bo Jackson, and Pat Dye. And Pat Dye wanted to hire Kirby. And I don't know what Pat and Bo did, but it was already a done deal. But Pat wanted to hire Kirby, and they said wouldn't let Kirby bring his own assistants, and they passed him up. And but they could have hired him then, but Kirby may have still left and went to Georgia. I mean, that is his dream job. I mean,
I don't think so because you got to think. How often do you see? Could you really leave a South Carolina or an Auburn to go to UGA?
South Carolina probably, but Auburn, I don't think so. Not to go to Georgia because I told a Georgia fan, I said, where do you get off thinking you're entitled? I said, You know, you're not even Auburn. You damn sure ain't Alabama.
And
I mean, Auburn's got more of wins. I mean, I don't know where Georgia gets off. Thinking they're entitled. They should be better. I mean, what, 8, 10,
you
9,
just
10 million people there?
they should be better, and they always find that one way. They always find that they always find a way to screw it up. But they're always, because that's the one thing that they probably hold over Auburn, is that they're always there. Auburn has
Yeah.
some. Auburn is really up and down. When they're really up, they're really
Yeah.
up, and when
Right.
they go down, they go down.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Auburn has those lean years, and you're right. Georgia, I mean, except for one or two here or there, Georgia's usually, right there in it. I mean, touch on Georgia Tech for a minute. I know they've had some lean years here and there, but that's a school that is to be so small at 4,000 or 5,000 students. I mean, they got a pretty rich tradition. I mean, when you win national championships, conference championships.
The thing with Georgia Tech is that, and really, you look at it, it's a lot of the schools in the South before pro sports came along. Georgia Tech was the big Georgia Tech was the big deal in the city of Atlanta.
Oh,
So
absolutely, yeah.
when city of Atlanta is blowing up in the early 19th century, or I'm sorry, early 20th century, where I'm thinking about the Civil War. When the city of Atlanta is blowing up in the early 20th century, Georgia Tech is blowing up right along with it. But then when the city of Atlanta blows up to the point to where they can start getting these pro sports, you bring in the Braves, you bring in the Hawks, you bring in the Falcons. That makes that Georgia Tech goes from being the only game in town to being the number 4 game in town. And then when you on top of that, when you have, which is arguably the only thing that stops it from being the biggest mistake that a school has ever made is the fact that Tulane did it, and Tulane hasn't ever, Georgia Tech at least got into the ACC. Tulane is still out there in the wilderness, so to speak.
Yeah.
Even the SEC, right at, I really do think that if they had left the SEC, like say in the 50s, things would be a little bit better, because you would have had that time, because Georgia Tech was still a top dog in the 50s.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that would have
Yeah.
carried up. But the twin daggers of leaving the SEC right at the time where pro sports comes into Atlanta, basically you have the 60s and the 70s, from the mid 60s up to probably when they won the national championship in 1990. Georgia Tech was irrelevant. I mean, they would have like one or like, because they had they were hiring fire coaches, and every coach that they would bring in would have like one or two good years. Bud Carson, Pepper Rogers,
I
the
forgot about Carson in there.
Curry, he had his good years.
Yeah,
Every
Curry had a few good years.
every coach would have like one or two good years, but for the most part, they were struggling. And like I said, that's about a 20-year period where Georgia Tech was entirely irrelevant, and like I said, it was entirely were they justified for why they left the SEC? Sure,
Yeah.
but was it still, at the end of the day? Could you have got Vanderbilt? Vanderbilt got over it. Ole Miss got over it. Mississippi State, all the other schools that weren't signing all of those players like Bama and the other schools were, they got over it. They dealt with it.
I wonder if that's made me thinking of something, because Kiffin's a hell of a recruiter. I know he's gonna get players. I wonder if the stigma is off Ole Miss enough that they can go and get more quality elite black athletes now that they no longer have the Confederate battle flag flying on their.
It's something that's always kind of amazed me. I honestly don't think that's been a problem for him.
Really? You don't think that when?
I think it's just the fact that you're in Oxford, Mississippi.
But this team won, what, 3 national championships
In the 50s and in the 50s, 60s,
I mean, maybe that, and and that could be it. I mean, because they did have. I mean, when I was growing up, they had a lot of good, athletes. I mean, I remember when Tuberville finally, changed it. But I
That's,
mean, that's still a bit hard, playing up under the Confederate battle flag, and
I mean, and like I said, I honestly, when I look at the talent that Ole Miss has had, and I'll be up, even though Mississippi State hasn't had as much, looking at the talent that Mississippi State has had, I'm honestly surprised that hasn't been as big of an issue as you would think it has been. Because I mean, it's it's still Oxford, Mississippi. It's still Starkville, Mississippi. You know, that's are you really going to go to Atlanta? Let's say hypothetically, are you going to go to, let's say, Decatur, Georgia? Are you really going to go to a kid in Decatur, Georgia and say, hey, you can go to, let's say you want to stay within a 100, I don't 100, 200-mile radius of, you want to stay within a 1 day's drive of your home so that your parents can go to every game that you play, just about every game that you play. Within that radius, if you just draw a circle between Decatur, Georgia, and Oxford, Mississippi, and then you draw a circle, how many places would you rather be in?
That's a good point.
Oxford, Mississippi. So, like, you think about it, you're talking about Bama, obviously. Bama's obviously, but you're also talking about Auburn. Auburn is right down next to Columbus, Georgia, which, I mean,
Well, I'd rather go to UAB than Starkville.
it would get Birmingham. Yeah, I mean, I mean, it's not New York City, but would you rather be in Birmingham wouldn't you rather be in Birmingham than to be in Oxford, Mississippi?
Yeah, I would absolutely. I'd rather be in Birmingham than Oxford. I mean, I remember the first time I went through Starkville, and I mean, it looked like to me they had just dropped a bunch of buildings in the middle of a cow pasture. I mean, that's literally what it looked like to me. And then I thought, how in the hell can you recruit anybody to come play here?
Well,
And
it's the fact that you're in a state that is going to produce, like I said, Mississippi. I want to say they still have, Louisiana might have passed them or something, but Mississippi has historically been per capita the biggest source of NFL draft picks out of any state in the country.
yeah, because it's only like I don't think it's 3 million people that live there.
It's a
looks like 2.9 or 2.8.
Yeah, but it's a lot of talent, and when you get, like, Alabama's going to come down there, and they're going to say, okay, we want that kid, and we want that kid. But Alabama's still recruiting everywhere else too. So Alabama's not going to get every kid out of Mississippi, and Auburn's not going to get every kid out of Mississippi. So if you're Ole Miss and you're Mississippi State, and you just get on top of you make sure you get your fair share of those Mississippi kids. And then you go down to Louisiana, and you pick out a couple of Louisiana kids, and then you go to Decatur, Georgia, and maybe you don't get that star out of Decatur, Georgia, who has his pick of all those places within that radius to go to. But maybe
a 3-star.
Maybe you get yourself a good 3-star, high 2-star talent out of Decatur, Georgia. Maybe you go up to there's enough at a school like that. I really think that it's I think Mike Leach is a great coach for a Mississippi school at this stage in his career, because a guy like Mike Leach, he can coach there for the rest of his life and get enough talent into that school that he can win 8 or 9 games every year. Are you going to win championships there? Maybe not.
You might get close. I mean, that year they had Dak. I mean, I think they finished 10-3, but that like I said, they get that they still didn't win it, but they can have a good team there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to be every year, but they could every 3 or 4 years they could have a good team.
But when you think about it, if you're low end with like I said, with the talent that you have within your fingertips, you're looking at a minimum of 6 wins every year.
Well, I didn't even think about that until you said it. If you could just hold on to what's in state, but but then go back what you mentioned a while ago though too. If you got somebody from Texas out there, you're gonna be able to get that kid out of Mississippi, out of Natchez, Mississippi. They gonna stay there.
Well, that's the one thing that's the one thing that I say a school like Ole Miss, that if you have the right coach and he can work it right, if you're a coach at Ole Miss or Mississippi, you got to think now. Think about it. Who is Texas going to be coming into Mississippi to be going after? They're not coming. They're not coming into Mississippi to look after to snatch up that 3-star prospect. They're going
Right.
for the 5-star prospect that Bama's going for.
Yeah.
For the same 5-star prospect that Georgia is rating your state to come for. Like I said, it sounds bad to say, but basically you give up that hope of you okay, maybe because you don't want to not recruit any kid that's in your state. But you really think about, okay, this kid is a 5-star prospect. We got to deal with Bama that's going to be going after him. We got to deal with Georgia that's going to be trying to get him. LSU is going to be trying to get him. And then, yeah, you're going to have these schools from out of the region like Texas, USC. Like USC should be trying to get that kid. I mean, are they?
Yeah.
Maybe they should be trying to get him. So, you say, you look at it and you say, okay, we're going to offer the kid a scholarship, and we're going to do our due diligence just to put in our due diligence, but we're really going to be focusing on the kids that Texas and USC aren't rating our state for, and the kids that Bama might be, they might look at them too a little bit because they're closer to home, but really Bama's focusing on that 5-star prospect and only kind of looking at that 3-star kid. But yeah, I think you can rack up, like I said, high 2s, 3-star prospects, maybe even low 4. I think you can rack up on that kind of talent.
And I've seen teams that Tubbs used to be that team 2014. I think that team was full of a bunch of 2- and 3-star players that turned into a good team. So the rating ain't always there, and that made me think too. My friend, he's a big Auburn fan. He was talking about Opelika down there, high school. So they got 2 5-star prospects, and they're not committing to Auburn. And he's like, they can't keep them there. It's like, well, man, maybe those kids want out of Auburn.
Like I said, unless you're Alabama, unless you're Bama, unless you're UGA, and unless you're LSU, I mean, why is that? If the kid is good, because I'm not familiar with where is Opelika, Alabama at geography wise.
I mean, it's just right around. It's Opelika's right up next to Auburn, Montgomery. It's
so basically
Columbus, Georgia.
Every reason basically he's already gotten everything he can get out of being an Auburn.
Right, exactly. And that's what I tell you. Why is he going to stay there in that region? I mean, when he's 5-star player. I mean, even if he went to Ohio State, I mean, or any place like that. I mean, that kid. Some of these kids have never been anywhere in their life. Poor kids grew up poor, didn't have anything, and they've never even been out of state. And now they got a chance to go play, football anywhere they want. I mean,
I would think that's the worst thing possible for a kid for a school like Auburn, that's kind of like out, on its own, and geographically, like Auburn, Clemson. Like I would hate it for Clemson if Clemson had like a super talented kid that just grew up in the Clemson area, because they've got no shot at that kid unless he just absolutely wants. Like Clemson is a little different because they're further removed. But yeah, that kid is in Opelika, Alabama. What reason does he have to go to Auburn?
Yeah, I mean,
Because
unless he just grew up loving Auburn, and
unless he grew up loving Auburn, because like I
but
said, geography wise, Bama is how far away is Bama from Auburn? It's
they're basically on opposite sides of the state. Alabama's almost on the Mississippi line, close to it, and Auburn's right there on the Georgia line.
It's probably about what, a 2 hour drive, 3 hour.
Yeah, about like that.
So
yeah.
So I mean, but now, okay, how far away is Bama from Birmingham compared to how far away Auburn is from Birmingham?
Both of them are Bama's about a 45-minute drive. Auburn's probably about an hour drive.
So Alabama's actually closer to Birmingham than Auburn would be.
Mm-hmm.
What about Montgomery?
Auburn's not. Auburn's right there at Montgomery. You're talking 30 minutes.
But is Montgomery a draw? Is Montgomery a
No. Montgomery, man, it's a big city. But they close down at 4:00 in the afternoon. I mean, every gas station closes, every store closes, restaurant closes. I mean, there's nothing doing in Montgomery.
So
I mean, but you can get the
probably. I would think Auburn is probably closer, but what about Mobile?
Mobile. Or how far is Auburn from Mobile or Tuscaloosa?
Both of them.
They're probably about the same distance, probably about 4 hours.
Okay, so basically, geography wise, if you're a kid that grew up right around Auburn, and you didn't grow up as an Auburn fan, let's just hypothetically say that you didn't grow up as an Auburn fan, and you want to, but you don't want to be far away from your family. Are you really losing much by going to Alabama as opposed to Auburn?
No. I mean, and as far as that goes, I mean, if you're talking about you don't want to be far away, I mean, you got Gainesville. It's not going to be, but probably about a 6-hour drive from Auburn. Georgia's not going to be. I mean, there's a lot of schools there you can go to.
I mean, like I said, it's you. That's the thing about recruiting in the South. If you pick any spot on the map and you go out and you say, okay, this is the farthest away that I want to be away from my home. You put that point on a map and you draw a circle and you put it. If you're, like I said, that's the thing that sucks about schools like Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and also Auburn into the hat. Maybe Tennessee, and Kentucky definitely. There's just not. I mean, if you're talking about the star level elite top end talent, that top end talent has too many options for you to get too worked up about not getting them.
Yeah, I mean, because even Baton Rouge, I mean, that's a neat little city, and it's still not that far of a drive.
Well, in Baton Rouge, Baton Rouge, when you're talking about LSU, you're in Baton Rouge, but the real draw for Baton Rouge is New Orleans.
And it ain't that far New Orleans from Baton Rouge. And I mean, I don't know if I lived in Louisiana for a while, and those Cajuns, that's a different breed of people, man. Cajuns are something else. Those people, I mean, it was like a whole different world when I went down there.
Yeah.
And they
like I would say the schools in the SEC, Bama, UGA, Florida, LSU, those should generally always be your top 4 schools in the SEC.
They should. And but I was thinking about something like that. I pointed out with my friends. Since Spurrier left Florida, now I know Meyer had those, those 2 national championships there, but take that little out of it. Florida really hadn't done nothing over the last 20 years.
No, they haven't, and you know what? I that speaks to the fact that Florida has historically been, is what did you say? What did Bear Bryant call them? They were the biggest underachievers.
Yeah.
They're probably still the biggest underachievers when you really think about it.
I mean, you know, they haven't won an SEC since 2008. They went to the game and got now. Last year, if they had 3 more minutes, they probably could have beat Bama. But they had been going and getting blown out. I mean, they really hadn't done nothing since that time. I mean,
Yep. But I will. Yes. Just like we were talking about Kirby Smart being on the hot seat earlier. I do think that if he doesn't get it this year, he will never get it, because I do like Dan Mullen more than I like Kirby. I think Dan Mullen, and I think Dan Mullen is at the point to where if he can prove that if he can bring in a good quarterback this year, I don't know who's going to replace Kyle Trask, but if they have a good replacement for Kyle Trask, Florida will go on to dominate that division for the next couple of years.
He's got to quit doing stuff like he's doing last year, fight start and going firing the crowd up. And a couple of years ago, they was up there at Vanderbilt, and he's staring down Derek Mason, and I'm thinking, man, you don't want any part of Derek Mason.
I think he does stuff. And like the stuff last year with the cut was saying that he wants to have a full stadium while COVID is going on and all this. I think he does stuff like that. But first of all, he comes from the Urban Meyer school.
That's true.
He's picked up on some of that stuff, and I think that he knows what he can do, and he knows what. Well, it's like you said, he doesn't want any part of Derek Mason, but he also, in the back of his mind, he's probably thinking, I can do whatever I want. He's thinking to himself, I can do whatever I want to do to piss off Derek Mason, because I know Derek Mason's not going to do anything, because Derek Mason's not stupid. I mean, if you know that, and that's kind of the thing with somebody like a Lane Kiffin. When you have that mentality to where I know that I can do whatever I know that I can say or do whatever I want to do, and you're not really going to reciprocate. You're not going to react in the way that will be the worst possible reaction for me. I can basically do whatever I want to do to you, because I know I can push whatever. If I know I can push a button and you're not going to slug me in my face, I'm just going to.
I don't know how Kiffin has this. I mean, he's probably has to be the greatest play caller I've ever seen. But you watch him on the sidelines. I mean, and when a quarterback, when he takes his first step with the foot back, Kiffin's already got the hands up. He's seen he already. I mean, he knows it as soon as the ball snapped. It's a touchdown. I've seen that so many times. I mean, and I just love watching him do that.
You know who else was like? He would never show it, because obviously he's, like I said, he had the personality of a piece of cardboard. Paul Johnson was like that. When he would call a play, it's because they see they're calling these plays because they see the defense, they see what the defense is giving them, and they're looking at it. They're saying, "I'm smarter than." They're thinking, "Okay, I'm smarter than this defensive coordinator. So this defense coordinator is showing me something. If I call the right play to react to what this defensive coordinator is showing me, as long as he doesn't have it, okay, if he's a clever defensive coordinator, if he's smart, or if his guys can just out athletic me, then yeah, they might blow it up. But 9 times out of 10, I beat you off of I've got you beat off of the snap, because I've got the perfect play call to go against what you've shown me. So unless you got something up your sleeves on defense, you're not gonna be able to batch it.
I remember I didn't know they'd never practiced it, but I was reading about and God, I loved Bill Oliver. I mean, I thought he was the greatest defense coordinator ever lived. When Alabama played Miami in '92, that defense was called 0-1 or something, and they put it in like day before practice. And I forgot the first or second series, and Oliver called it, And they said Langham and all them was, oh, he called it. And that's when they walked all 11 players up the line of scrimmage. And Toretta just got the ball and threw it away. And Alabama did it again, walked up there. He called a timeout, and he got over there on the phone. Was like, what are they doing? And the coach upstairs says, I don't know. He said, we'll figure it out in a couple of series. He said, a couple of series, the game will be over with.
Yeah, and that's another good. If you know off the snap that your opponent doesn't have an answer for it, then you know you got them beat right then and there. Because I mean, there aren't too many qualified geniuses calling plays in football, and most of them aren't on the defensive side of the ball. So if you're on the other side of the ball, and you know that this guy, he's just not as smart as me, and you call your right play, you got him beat. Because players aren't, unless those players can just become supermen and just react at the speed. They have to make these reactions at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, I mean, they got so many reads they got to make. I mean, those guys. I mean, they are so smart. I mean, you got to be smart to play in this game. I mean, because you can see like when they have a blown coverage, when they get mixed up with safety over here, when guy wide open. I mean, they're so advanced now, man. I mean, and these kids are smart. I was listening to God back. It seems like yesterday, but Alabama was fixing to play Auburn, and when they had Cam, and they was talking to Bill Oliver. And they said, "Well, how would you scheme him?" And he said, "Well, I'd play a zone gap. Every front four had a zone." He said, "I would walk the corners up to the line, play a press man, safeties over the top." He said, "My middle linebacker would spy him wherever he goes." He goes, "But even with that, I'm not sure you can stop him."
And that's another one. Like I said, if you just got it's amazing when you just have you either have the right play or you just have that right, like Vince Young in the 2005 national
Oh
championship.
my God, that was one of the greatest performances. Lord,
I was just going to beat you.
And I thought when USC went up by 2 scores, I thought, man, that thing's over. It's and when he took that, I mean, Vince Young just put that team on his back.
You know what? I never thought about it until somebody made a. I was reading. It was when they were talking about Reggie Bush, his Heisman when he was trying. Somebody mentioned it when he was trying to get his Heisman trophy back with the new rules that they passed and everything. And somebody made a good point. We think of Reggie Bush as being a failure, as being all this and all that, in large part because Vince Young played such a great game in that national title game. Like people have been convinced that it was a close Heisman race between him and Reggie Bush just because of that one game and because of how he won it. Well, you think back, that game was that season, he was nowhere close to being near Reggie Bush.
No, absolutely not.
No. Reggie Bush has a decent game, but because Vince Young was so good in that game that it made you say, "Oh, Reggie Bush, you just had a decent game. This guy just had the best game ever." And we think about Reggie Bush. Oh, he was terrible in that. People think, "Oh, he was terrible in that," and all this and all that. No, he had a decent game.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, I guess people's memories fade or whatever, but no, it was just, and really, when you think about what sticks out to me is really Vince Young in that fourth quarter. I mean, just the way he just took over that game, and they were just, I mean, it was something else. But
it goes back to what you were saying about the triple I, even though it's not. It goes back to what you were saying about the triple I. If you put Texas was basically running a single wing out of a shotgun.
I was talking to somebody about that the other day. They're talking about these spread offenses or something. I said that's the only thing it is just a hybrid of the old single wing offense.
Yeah,
that's what they're doing. I mean, you got a quarterback who can run, and you got 3 the receivers lined up there. So That's the only thing it is.
That's all it is. You got Vince Young in the shotgun. He gets hiked the ball. He turns around. Okay, he might give it to the running back. He might not. He doesn't give it to the running back. He might throw it to a receiver, or he might not. And if he doesn't throw it to a receiver, he's running. That was their offense. But he was just so good at it that you couldn't stop it.
And it's still because a coach told me one time, they was talking about, I've been enamored with these young coaches and their schemes and everything. He said, look, I don't care what kind of scheme you run. He said, the team that tackles and blocks the best is going to win every game.
That's it.
I was like, yeah, the team up front's going to do it. I mean, hey, so we'll close things out on this playoff thing. So they got the she's got 64 teams. What happens to the other teams? Is it going to be like a Mid-American or something? I mean, surely they're not going to close down football with all those guys. Are they going to have like a NIT at the end of the season or something?
They would almost be guaranteed to have to. That's really when you really, like I said, I didn't think about it until we were getting into it, but the more I think about it, the more that I'm convinced that this Texas Oklahoma thing might not be. Like I said, the fact you can't be going through the whole playoff. You got to think. We had this whole playoff discussion. That was what 2 months ago? About a month, 2 months ago. And supposedly this Texas Oklahoma thing has been going on for 5 months or so. So you got to think. You're going through all of this with that in your mind. You have to know because like I said, if you're Texas or Oklahoma and you know that this 12-team playoff is a done deal, so to speak, why are you going to go to the SEC? You have to know. That once we go to the SEC or possibly to the Big Ten, that is something that I do think is something else on. They might be bluffing everybody, and they might be saying, they might be gearing everybody else up for them to go to the SEC, but really they're talking about going to the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that.
But either way,
I wouldn't want to go to the SEC. I wouldn't want to go step at the SEC. That's like we're talking about Dabo. Oh, he'll come back to Alabama. It's like, he ain't gonna come into Alabama.
Especially if you're talking about a 12-team playoff where 5 conference champions are guaranteed a spot. Okay, so that means I'm going from the Big 12 where first of all, I have a 1 out of 10 spot, 1 out of 10 chance to go just if everything were equal, but everything's not equal. So if I'm Oklahoma and Texas, I basically you have to figure is that we at least what a 50% chance that the winner of that game goes to win Big 12. So like I said, you're going from a 50% chance, at least a 50% chance that you're going to be in the playoff as long as you win the Big 12.
Yeah, I'd like to sit down there, man, and look at this. That's interesting now. Yeah, I mean, why would you leave that and come to the SEC? I mean,
it's because that once we do this, once we set this ball rolling, the other balls are going to start rolling. And when all the balls when all the balls stop rolling, ain't nobody thinking about a 12-team playoff. So the result that we end up with after all the balls stop rolling is one where everybody. But what did we start off you didn't record it, but what did we start off the conversation saying? There aren't 3. There've never been 4 legitimate playoff teams.
Absolutely not. I mean, you can look at the drop off.
If you have 4 super conferences, then it's easy to say, okay, we could have a 4-team playoff.
God, if you had a 4 super conference, 14 playoffs, I mean, you could have 3.
Or maybe you do still have your playoffs. And it's just all.
If I'm Oklahoma, I'm like thinking if I'm Oklahoma and Texas, last thing I got my eye on is going in the SEC and playing Alabama and Georgia and Florida and Texas A&M and LSU and I mean, I'm more looking at the Big Ten or the hell. Even see what I can work out with the Pac-12.
If I'm looking, like I said, if we're serious about this 12-team playoff deal, if we, the world of college football, if we're serious about this, and I'm Oklahoma and Texas, I'm staying my little butt here in the Big 12.
Oh, for sure.
So, like I said,
So you got a 12-team playoff. So what do you do? First four teams get a bye.
yeah, that's how it would have been worked out. Top four teams get a bye. There was they hadn't said if those top four. There was some disagreement about whether that top four would have to be conference champions or if they would just be the top four teams overall.
I think it'd have to be the top four teams overall. Well, are you going to play all these games in a bowl games, or are they going to have some? Are they going to be played at home? I mean, because
that was one issue that they had was that basically if you were a team that finished between 5 and 8, 5, 6, 7, 8, yeah, you got 5, 6, 7, 8. You actually got an extra home game because the first rounds were going to be at home.
Yeah, because you'd almost have to do that because you talk about, people can't afford to go to a conference championship game, and then I don't know how they afford to do 2 playoff games. I mean,
on such short notice, you can't work out those arrangements, and especially for the bowl game. So no,
that's
it
a
would be
lot of money.
yeah. So the first round would be at home, but then I want to say the second round the going forward, they would all be neutral site games. It'd be incorporated to bowl games.
Yeah, I guess that would work. I mean, but I'm still, I mean, I got to see it. Just like we said about, 4 legitimate playoff teams. I can remember, you can't tell, when number 22 would upset a number 1, number 20, or an unranked team would upset number 1. I mean, that don't happen anymore. I mean, you rarely see. I mean, you're getting blown out.
You got to think outside of Bama, because Bama has legitimately lost to the teams that they've lost to the last couple of years have been legitimately great teams.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, no doubt about it.
But other than them, the other teams that have lost, like Clemson, okay, they lost to Notre Dame last year without Trevor Lawrence.
Right.
But you look at Clemson, they lost to Pitt one year. They lost to Syracuse one year.
Mm-hmm.
Decent teams when they beat them, but they weren't, weren't.
Another year, Syracuse had a beat, and they had to come from behind. Went on the last play of the game.
That was the year that was the year after that was the year where they told Kelly Bryant that he wasn't going to be the starter and gave him the opportunity to leave the team because they have that 4-game window. So they gave it was after that because Georgia Tech was their 4th game, and Georgia Tech was their 5th game. So they told him before the Georgia Tech game, you can go transfer and we won't stand in your way. So he left, and then Trevor Lawrence comes in, blows us out, but then they play Syracuse the next week, and he gets hurt on like the first series or something.
Yeah.
And then that's when they had to have the backup come in and help and win the game for him.
Syracuse did something. They went for it and didn't convert and gave them the ball back or late in the game. I forgot, something like that. They went down, scored, and beat them.
There was I can't remember exactly what it was. There was a crazy sequence towards the end of that game. Yeah. But yeah.
And then, last year, was that the end? North Carolina went for 2 against Clemson, and they scored there. They'd have beat them.
Well, that's what I was getting at. See, North Carolina was a good team, and North Carolina team that Clemson went into that game. I think we talked about it the last time with Bama against Ole Miss, or against. They just had that mentality of you're just not going. You can put up as good of a fight as you want to, but because we're expecting you to put up this fight, we're just not going to let you. We're going to do whatever it takes to end up winning this game. Whereas, like I said, the Pitt, the Syracuse, those games just sneak up on you.
Yeah.
And like I said, Ohio State's the same way. They lose to they'll lose to an Iowa or Purdue.
Yep.
But they'll blow it. They'll get up for Michigan because they know to get up for Michigan. They'll get up for Penn State because they know to get up for Penn State. Like I said, that's the only, and I guess that's my long-winded way to get around to the point. Nowadays, if you're one of those top teams, the only way that you're going to lose a game is if you just don't show up to play.
Don't show up. Yeah, that's
like
true.
Said, in the day, a 22 ranked team could just be flat out better than you on a given day.
Oh,
because the difference wasn't that great.
Yeah, I don't remember it. I was just a little kid, but I think it was in 80 or 81. I think it's last year I won the SEC title. We played Georgia Tech out at Legion Field, and Georgia Tech beat Alabama. And Georgia Tech lost 10 straight games. Alabama finished 9-1-1, won the share of the SEC. I mean, but
that was also, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say that was the year that Georgia won a championship, or was it Clemson?
I don't know. I think it was actually Clemson, because I think that was 81, and Alabama finished 9-2-1 that year.
I want to say it was a year for Georgia. It might have been the year because Georgia beat Pitt to win the national championship, didn't they? Or was it?
No, Georgia beat Notre Dame.
It was Notre Dame.
Yeah, Georgia beat Notre Dame, and in that year, and then I think Georgia played Pitt the next year.
Okay, it's one of those years where I want to say Georgia Tech tied Notre Dame, and that had a tie-in to the national championship result.
Georgia.
Hello? Okay. You there? Hello? Hello?
Hey, you there, William?
Yeah.
Okay. Wi-Fi must have went short. Yeah, I think that was 1981 or 1980, because when Georgia played Notre Dame was 9-1-1 in that national championship game.
Okay.
When Georgia beat them, because it was the first or second play of the game, a series. Herschel dislocated his shoulder, and they went over and told Vince that Herschel was out. They told Herschel he was out, and Herschel said, "I'm not out." And they said, "Yeah, you are." That's the season-ending injury. Herschel said, "Pop it back in." They popped it back in. I mean, I can't imagine the pain he went through. He carried the ball 34 times in that game.
Yep.
So I guess next time we'll do coaches on the hot seat. What about that?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
I'll set one up soon and do that. And